All right, I think we are live. Welcome, cuties and friends. I'm very excited to welcome you tonight and welcome to QT Connect Coffee Talks. So this is where we tell stories about everything tech and queer. I'm really excited for today. And so for those who don't know me, I am Nofel, co-founder of Queer Tech, and I will be your host for this session. I am based in Montreal, also known as Teotihuacan, and really excited to be with you today. So before we get started, just want to thank our sponsors and QT partners for this year. It's been an amazing year. 2020 is almost over, and we all can't wait for it to be over. So thank you so much for QT annual partners and Pride Hacks partners this year. It's been amazing to have Unity Technologies, Van Hacks, Fierté Montréal, BaySafe, Breed Life, Element AI, Local Logic, and Mocha.ai. Thank you for the support. Without you, Queer Tech cannot continue to do the activities we do, so we are very grateful for the support. Queer Tech also can't run, and since we are volunteer-based, without our amazing volunteers, these organizations won't exist. So I want to thank a special thank to Diego, Kate, and Guy for their amazing support and continuous work they do. And so for those who want to also support Queer Tech or volunteer for us, we are always looking for people to help, especially with our 2021 plan. So you can email me or Andy. Either our emails on the screen. It's nofel@queertech.ca, nds@queertech.ca. So email us. We'd love to hear. We're looking for project managers for the virtual career fair we're hosting. We're looking for people to help organizing Pride Hacks, people to help us research and work on QT Connect. So a lot of opportunities to help and donate some time. And a quick announcement, I'm very excited. We've been doing a lot of work with Andy in the background to get ready for 2021. And tomorrow we will be launching our job board. So if you are looking to connect with partners who are very keen on diversity and inclusion and are looking also supporting Queer Tech, you can go on queertech.org/jobs, and you will see there are some available jobs there, but we will have a brand new job board that's launching tomorrow. So really excited for that. And so for those who also love what we do and want to support us, You can also donate to QueerTech on our website, queertech.org. Feel free to go on there and support the organization. For those who have questions or comments, you can comment on the comment section on the social media platform that you're using. We do like to share some of the comments that you have. So be aware that we will be showing them on the screen. So your name and pictures that you have associated with that social media will appear on the screen here. Also, if you have any questions, you can ask on the comment section, and Andy will help us coordinate the questions, make sure that they are appropriate for the screen. So get ready and let's get started. So, some of you might know the guest we have today. It's someone that goes way back in the queer community in Montreal. It's someone that is very dear and close to my heart, and I love working with her, hanging out with her. And so please welcome Laura Boo. I love the fireworks also. So it's really exciting. So, as you might know, I'm probably one of the luckiest that get to have Laura, work with Laura, and see Laura on a daily basis. Well, behind the screen now, because I don't get to see you next to my desk as usual. How are you, Laura?
I'm doing really good. This was such a fun thing in the middle of my day in my house. It's the first time I've put on a full face of makeup in probably a month, which I realize that I really need to. It feels so good to have it on after, usually I do a lot of drag, I do a lot of performing, and when I go to the office, I'm usually in my full business lady drag. So now that we've been all working from home, I think I've let it slip a bit, and I didn't realize how much I missed it until today when I was putting on the face for this. I was like, God, this feels good.
That's amazing. You look wonderful. As usual. And so, for those who don't know Laura, well, you're missing out a lot. But I really wanted to have Laura in here because Laura has this intersection of different aspects of her. She worked with us at Local Logic as director of finance and accountant, but there is so many sides to Laura that we want to discover. Laura is an artist, you're a host, you're a performer, you do stand-up comedy, you're an anarchist, you're an anti-capitalist, you're an accountant also, and you're a big advocate for social and affordable housing. And so there's just so much. You're also a podcast host now that I actually love listening to. And so let's get started and kind of tell us a little bit more about you.
Okay, so I decided we talked about this a bit in advance, but I decided I'm going to take this kind of introduction to also tell you a bit about my journey to where I am working in finance and technology, because I think this is the part of my life that probably might be the most helpful for people right now in the pandemic, queers who are thinking about making a big career change. Yeah. So I started my career in the arts. I followed my passions. I got a master's degree in art history from the University of British Columbia and started working at arts nonprofits on the West Coast. And simultaneously was also involved in community organizing and a personal art practice. So I curated events and exhibitions, but I also made art. Most of my art is performance-based. I got very involved in cabaret and in nightlife, in stand-up comedy. I worked as a DJ for many years, and mostly through most of my 20s and the very beginning of my 30s, I was kind of doing this, classic sort of artist hustle where I was, working nonprofit jobs, sometimes contractual, sometimes part-time, sometimes full-time. It was really not not stable. And
Mhm.
then I had this whole other part of my life that was in clubs and in galleries and in bars and in lofts and all over the place, performing and kind of living that life that I loved. But it was very hard to patch together a living. And it got a lot harder under the Harper government as arts funding was cut. And it got a lot harder after 2008. And I reached a point where I kind of had a realization that I didn't think I was going to make it. I was really worried about not having money to grow old. I was really worried that I wasn't going to be able, because I was working 80 hours a week on all these different projects to make $20,000 a year, 25, because so much of my work was unpaid. So much of my labor was activist labor. It was arts labor. It was, and that was really great when I was a punk living on the east side of Vancouver, eating partially out of the garbage. It didn't matter. But, when you hit that Saturn returns moment in the late 20s, and then you have your 30th birthday, you kind of have a moment where you're like, I wonder if I'm going to be homeless when I'm old. So I made this decision that I think a lot of my friends were surprised by, which was around the time that I turned 32, I made the decision to basically start over and become an accountant, which involved having to go back to the beginning. And I started a new undergraduate degree, which a lot of people, when you have a master's degree, you constantly get asked if you're going to ever do a PhD. And I went the other direction where I was like, you know what? At 32, I'm going to start an undergrad, a Bachelor of Commerce, where my classmates are all 19. And so I went back to school. I got my undergrad in accountancy. And then I started a job at the largest public accountancy and consulting firm in the world, which is PricewaterhouseCoopers. Mm-hmm. And I was working at Price while I did my graduate diploma in order to get my CPA and passed my exam. And at a certain point, and I think we'll go into this more later, I was really realizing that even though getting that job was great for my career, it was not good for me personally. And I had an opportunity came up. And we can talk about how that happened a little bit later. But after 2.5 years of working at PwC, I made the jump to working for a small tech startup, which is Local Logic. And that's where my life started to, I think, regain a lot of balance, because I kind of went and see there's my coworker at Local Logic actually slacking me. Just saying. So then I started working at Local Logic about 2 years ago, and I started as a financial analyst, and I progressed in my post to now where I am building out an entire department. And it's also given me space to try to combine my life pre-accounting, so my politics, my passion for community, with all this new amazing knowledge and these skills that I have, which are kind of rare in the community, in my queer community, especially my queer activist community. A lot of people don't know about money because they see money as the enemy. They see it as an evil that they have to endure. And so because of that, they don't learn how to navigate the world, the capitalist world. And so in the last 2 months, I've launched a podcast with my very good friend, Hadassah Damien, who is another queer artist, femme artist, who also has in the last few years made a career for themselves in finance, and now works as a researcher in a major bank in New York City. So we do this podcast called Bottom Lines, Top Dollars. Very thinly veiled queer reference there. And it is a podcast where we're definitely taking this, lefty, anti-capitalist perspective, but also a perspective of people who work in finance and capitalism, and we talk about money issues. So that's I'm in a way, it's come to replace all my stand-up and cabaret that I
Yeah.
did pre-pandemic. Now I'm doing something still performative, but podcast style.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
That's
love
it.
that. I mean, there's just so much to unpack. And so me and you talk a lot. So we'll try and stay on course for the next 30 minutes or so and really help. Last week, and well, couple 2-3 weeks ago, we had Charlie, who also on the call, and it was really
Charlie
amazing to
DeVille.
see also how they moved from being a graphic designer to really repackaging themselves and becoming a front-end developer. And so for those who are interested, you're a graphic designer, you're looking, that's a great episode to watch. You can see it on our social media. And I come back to really that story of like people who are artists. Sometimes you struggle and sometimes you feel like you don't know anything, so you can't do anything, right? And so you feel like that's the only thing. Oh, I'm an artist, I do events, and now there's a pandemic and I'm stuck and I can't host events, you can't perform. And so they don't know that there is this opportunity to repackage yourself, right? And go into the business world. And so you decided to go to school. And so I'm curious, back, in the days where you're punk artist, anarchist, anti-capitalist, and you had this realization that you want to turn your life. What was that process like? Was it just, did you wake up and you're like, I'm going to school, I'm done? Did it take you a long time? How did you get there?
Okay, so it was kind of a decision that happened at the end of a bad time in my life. And maybe others who are living through a rough time right now might be able to sympathize with this. But I went through a really rough period in my life where a bunch of bad stuff happened. And I was really quite depressed. And I was really quite upset about how my life was turning out.
Mm-hmm.
And there were things about my life that I loved, but they were so tangled up with this mess that I had made. And I think that I just had a moment where I was like, I was so sad and I felt so down about my life. And I literally felt like I was on the edge.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, if I don't change something major in my life, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it money-wise, but I'm also just not going to make it mental health-wise.
Yeah.
And so I went back home to my mom's house, and it was around the holiday time anyway, so I was going to visit them for the holidays. And I remember sitting there and being like, Mom, I need to do something or else I'm not going to make it. And I'm thinking that my career is at a dead end. And I'm like, I think I need to change everything. And so I started to consider this idea of really changing everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a slow process because it also involved a little bit of mourning because, I really wanted to be a successful artist. I had a vision of myself being a star. I had a vision of myself being so successful, as an artist and part of and having this amazing career, like beating the odds.
Yeah.
And having to admit that maybe it wasn't meant to be was a little bit, it was a little bit of like a mourning period to come to accept it. So I think it was good to sit with my mom, because my mom is like a really working class lady who's a bit no bullshit. Like, she's loving and she's caring, but she's also like, she's a nurse.
Yeah.
she's a no bullshit kind of lady. And so we sat down and we just made a list, and we made 2 columns. And one was, what do I want from a potential future job? And the other side was, what am I good at? Because I think that when I chose my career in my early 20s, it was all about what was I passionate about. And I loved art and music and performance and nightlife. That's everything I wanted. And my parents were really supportive. But when you're 30 years old, now you know yourself a bit better. And I knew what I was good at, because what you love is not necessarily what you're good at. So I made this list, and in my want side for my profession, I thought about things like, well, I want something where I'm never going to be unemployed again, because throughout my 20s, I fought with unemployment and it was really demoralizing. Second, I wanted something where if I wanted to, I could work for myself. And I was like, I'd had experiences with employers in my 20s where I was like, I am never working for another psychopathic megalomaniac again. So if I needed to, I could work for myself.
Yeah.
Which meant getting a profession.
Yeah.
And, I had a couple other things, and I literally also did stuff like I looked up employment statistics in Canada about certain professions. Like once I had narrowed it down, and I know this is a really Capricorn thing to do, but when I had narrowed it down to a few things where I actually, Googled employment statistics for those professions, looking at, unemployment rates, because those statistics are available. So you can look at what your prospects are for a future profession.
Yeah.
The other side of the page was all the things I was good at. And I realized that even though I was, this radical anti-capitalist activist who volunteered at anarchist bookstores and, worked in nightlife and often worked for free, I also realized that in every collective that I ever volunteered at, I was always the person who handled the money. If we had to do negotiations with a bar owner or a venue owner, I would negotiate. I was good at that. I was good at making budgets, even without knowing really how to do it. I had a good sense of that. I realized I was organized in that way, and that I kind of looked at some of my skills, and then at that point I was like, maybe accounting would be something that was good for me. I was like, I'm a good businesswoman. And if I want not just to be a businesswoman, if I also want to have a profession, then an accountant is, you can get a designation, a CPA. And that's a level, the level that I wanted. So I sometimes tell people who come to me and ask, because I do get other queers who sometimes contact me and they say, I'm thinking of becoming an accountant. Should I do it? And I was like, well, there's lots of different kinds of accountants.
Yeah.
There's, bookkeepers, and there are tax professionals, and there are CPAs, and they're different levels of education. Yeah. They have different, kind of brackets of earning potential. They have different, there's different aspects to it. I decided that I wanted, even though it was going to take me a long time, I was like, I want that designation so that I can work for myself.
Yeah.
And at that point, I just went for it.
You went for, and this is amazing, right? Like hearing you looking at how you package that experience, like your artist experience, and comparing. I think a lot of folks who organize events have actually so many skills that they don't think about. And we have a lot of common friends who are artists, and a lot of time they only think about the creative aspect of it, right? They think that their job is only to stand up and to do the performance, and that's what they're good at. But the reality is they can package that experience so much more, like the finance piece is one of it. But, I was talking with a friend about them organizing the event. I'm like, not only you have a skill of organizing an event, but like there is this process you go through to create the event. It's like almost like you're creating this product, and like you're almost a product manager, right? Where you sit and you're like, we're going to create this event. Who is the target? How the target group? What is the experience we want them to have? And you like start putting that together. And so, like that's what a product manager is, right? Because a lot of folks, they look at it and they're like, what is a product manager? And so, it's like just taking that step and saying, if that's what you like, there is that aspect of creative, but also structuring the different part of the work that you do. So so that's amazing. So it's interesting because you said you want it to be a star, and in my eyes, you are a star.
In my own way.
You are, and I think even I mean, the community see you as a star, right? And but it's also, we need to be happy with where we are at, right? It's not just the perception that people might have. And so you went through this process going to school. Did you have it? Sounds like, did you have any money saved to go to school? Did you have to work and go to school? Like, how did you pay for school? How did you get to school? And you went, which school did you go to?
So I did my undergrad at Concordia at the John Molson School of Business, and when I did my graduate work for my CPA, I did it at McGill.
Mm-hmm.
And I did this because I was unable to move at that time. I was broke when okay, I'm going to use two different words because I want to make this difference. I'm not calling myself poor because I wasn't poor. I was broke.
Okay.
And I think that I think that sometimes people confuse what those two things are. I wasn't in a position where I was systemically intergenerationally without resources.
Yeah.
I was in a situation where I basically was unemployed, and I was on unemployment, and I had no cash savings. So I was pretty broke, but I had this one thing that really helped me, which was in earlier times when I had finished school at the age of 23, I had gone to my bank and I had done this one thing that, I think my mother or somebody advised me to do, which is I set up an auto withdrawal from my account that would put $50 a month into an RRSP. And then I ignored it. And
Wow.
and so it kept going for about 10 years. And so when I went back to school, I had a little bit of savings in my RRSP. Now, that didn't help me as a broke
RRSP. Maybe some folks don't know what a RRSP.
Right. So it's in Canada, our retirement, if you're going to start a personal retirement savings plan for which you want to get government tax breaks, the program that we have available here in Canada is called the Registered Retirement Savings Plan, or an RRSP. So the thing about that, and the reason why I say I was broke, is because I couldn't access that money to, for example, pay for rent or food.
No.
But in Canada, there are basically three ways that you get that money out. You either retire at the age of 65 and start taking the money out, or there are two programs that you can use to access that money. One is buying your first home. You can use it as a down payment. And the second is called the Lifelong Learning Plan, which means that you can take that money out. You can borrow from yourself to pay for school for either yourself or your spouse. You can't use it to pay for kids, but you can use it for yourself or your spouse. And so I was able to take out a little bit of money, and that at least got me started, because at the beginning, I couldn't even access I couldn't access anything. And so I used that, and I applied for student loans in Quebec. And I chose to go into debt because I knew that my employment prospects at the end of my program were excellent. Okay. When I had done art school, I had never taken a student loan because I knew that I was going to live a pretty rock and roll life and that I wasn't going to be able to pay back any loans. Yeah. And so, when I was very young, when I did school, I was lucky I continued to live with my parents. So I took out loans, and in Quebec, if you take out loans, you can also get bursaries, which really helped. And then I had a couple windfalls of luck. I managed to get a job as a TA. Within a couple semesters, there was a teacher who noticed me, maybe because I had hair the color of a traffic cone and was full of tattoos. And I was the only one who looked like that in his managerial accounting class. But he noticed me. He offered me a TA-ship. That helped me. And I started really hustling.
While you were not thinking about it, it wasn't on your radar. It's someone who was like, you should be a TA. You're excellent at this.
Yeah. Noticed me and gave me that opportunity. So between the tutoring and taking out this money from my RSP, which a lot of people don't know that you can take that money out, it really helped me pay for that beginning part of school. And the great thing about it is once I got in, the
Mhm.
opportunities started to come, like
Yeah.
the opportunity to TA. And then once I got the job at Price paid for my graduate work.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was part of my employment contract, was that they would pay for my graduate work, and pay for my professional exam, with the promise that I would stay with them for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, and you mentioned luck, and I think being lucky might factor in this process, but I think also it speaks to your character, right? And you were very serious about going to school, and you've seen this as the opportunity to turn your life around. So you got noticed. I think a lot of folks also don't think that they can go look for opportunities, right? Like if you are going to school, you might not be like Laura, who wasn't sure she can TA, but today you can go and ask for it, right? You can go ask professors. You can, like, there is ways to generate also some income while you're at schools and building that career.
Yeah, and you know what? I learned going to school as someone in my early 30s was so different than going to school in my late teens and early 20s.
Yeah.
My first degrees that I got when I was very young, I was the first person in my family, as far as like, neither my mother nor my father had gone to university. And I chose an academic path. And I think that one of the troubles that I had early on was that I didn't understand. Like, I was very good at school. You give me an assignment, I do it. I Capricorn the shit out of it, no
Yeah.
problem. But I didn't know how to navigate the kind of unspoken networks and expectations, the networking, the social systems. I didn't know how to leverage the stuff that's out there the way that other people knew, because they came from families who had already walked that path.
Yeah.
And when I went back in my 30s, I knew I had lots of friends who had gotten higher education, who had gotten PhDs. I had learned a lot about the value of digging for scholarships, and I did get a scholarship. I ended up, well, that was the other thing. I ended up getting a scholarship from HSBC for a women in leadership program.
Mhm.
And that was $20,000. It's a
Wow.
big deal.
Yeah.
And when I got that scholarship, after I got it, I found out that only 10 people had applied for it. So I found out that a lot of scholarships at universities, they end up not getting anyone applying for it. And so they don't give it out in certain years because they haven't gotten any applicants. So the second time I went to school, I was at the finance office, and I was like, I am a mature student. I'm gay. I am this. I am that. I was practically like, do you have any scholarships for fat people? I was like, anything you want. I was like, my dad was Scottish and Irish, and my mom was Ukrainian and French Canadian. You got any scholarships for that? Like, I dug like a raccoon through the lists of scholarships until I found, and I applied for every single one that I was eligible for.
Yeah.
And I only got one. I probably applied for like 30. I only got one, but it was $20,000.
Yeah.
And what that meant is that when I graduated, I was able to pay off my student loans within 4 months of graduating.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's fascinating. And I think this is like going to school and learning how to navigate the system, especially when you're more of an adult, right? And in your 30s is can be trickier, right, for people and feeling comfortable in that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that part. So I want to move into like the professional world, right? And so there is 2 chapters kind of like comes after school. You worked at PwC, a large public accounting and consulting firms, and then you came at Local Logic. So how did you end up at PwC? Was that what you wanted to do when you were at school? And
yes. So there was a few things, and I had some learnings from this, which was when I went to school, I decided that I was going to go for this CPA thing. And to be honest, I didn't really know what it was. Like, I was like, this seems to be the way to go. And I was like, I'm going to save my life, full steam ahead. And I didn't truly understand it. So while I was in my undergrad, I learned a lot about what a CPA actually does and the process to get your CPA and how to get a job. Now, if you want to become a CPA, it's much like becoming a lawyer or a doctor or any other profession where there is an order that you register with. It's really highly regulated. And just like lawyers or anyone else, and I feel like if you're somebody who really struggles to find work and you're bad at finding the listings, you're bad at applying for jobs, doing something like becoming a CPA or another kind of more regulated, high demand profession, the employers come looking for you.
Yeah.
As an accountant in an undergrad, there's an official recruitment process. Like as a lawyer, an undergrad lawyer, the
Also,
law firms come to campus and they look for you. It's really intense. And so I went through a process where you're constantly going to cocktails and networking events, and all of it was networking with all the potential firms to work for. And it's really a pipeline that drives you towards working at a public firm. And so I kind of got caught up in that pipeline as well. And it's a really rigorous process where, you're both applying to try and get into one of the big, amazing firms, like what they call the big four that are the most prestigious. Everyone competes for them. And I got caught up in that too. I was like, I want to be the best and I want to work at the best. And, I kind of lost track of myself in that, a little bit like that competitive flow. And so I got that job, and I did everything to get that job. I changed myself a lot because the firms, I see that Charlie DeVille is asking, hi, Charlie, did you dye your hair a normal color for job interviews, or did you come as you are? I knew that the big four firms, to get a job, I had to change myself to fit. And I made this decision to try to change myself. And it was, I called it like business lady drag. I was like, I'm sending, I even had a name. I was like, I used my birth middle name, Claudia. I was like, I'm sending Claudia McDonald to these interviews. And it was a different person. I dyed my hair like a color that, I'm not going to use the word normal, but I'm going to say a color that feasibly could have been growing out of my own skull. I chose a color like that. I did things like I took out my facial piercing, and I saved money and I bought a bunch of clothes to go to interviews that were long sleeves, high neck, covered all my tattoos. Like, I changed my shopping so much that the Facebook algorithm started to show me advertisements for like modest clothing companies. Like, it was all like hijabs and long sleeves because of how I had changed what I was purchasing. The algorithm thought I had converted.
And this is really important aspect because, a lot of queer people and trans people that we talk to is going to that first job is so nerve-wracking, right? And going into this corporate world is that we also always feel like we need to remove part of us and leave it at home and then put a face on and then go to get those jobs because that's the only way.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of had this thought process where I said, what are the parts of me that I need them to accept? And what are the parts of me that I am willing to conform to what they need? And I knew that accounting firms are really conservative when it comes to appearance because they send their accountants to their clients. I knew that they had dress codes. Like, they're a profession that has dress codes. And so I decided that I wanted one of these big four jobs. And so I did that. But then there were other places where I would not compromise. In my resume, I made it very, very obvious of two things. I mentioned my working class upbringing and my class background. I talked about growing up in the harness racing community, a hardworking working class community. I felt like that was important for me.
Why did you feel that was important?
I felt like it was important because I think in a way it was me signaling that I'm not part of a moneyed class of people. I think that sometimes in these business jobs, a lot of people who have family connections, who are part of a business network, who are part of that upbringing, they get jobs in a snap because they're part of a cycle and a system. And I feel like it's important. It was important for me to say, you know, I am striving to join this community, but I don't come from this community. I'm, and somewhere in my mind, it was also maybe a really underground flag of sort of my political leanings, even if they didn't pick it up, a little dog whistle. The other thing was my resume was gay. My resume was so gay. I made sure to mention like volunteer stuff at gay organizations, Head and Hands, Project 10, anything where I was trying to, you know, make them aware that I was going to be out at work.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to also screen out any employers, any homophobic employers.
So, you and this is fascinating because I think the process you go through, I think a lot of folks go through that by trying to pick and choose what is it they can keep and what is it they can't keep. Unfortunately, sometimes there is things that, you know, people can't remove and they have to show up with that, and sometimes you work through that. But I think it's important, as we see more and more companies looking for diversity, that you should use that as your card, right? I tell a lot of folks, tell them like that you're queer, like put it in your resume, put it in your card, tell them that you're a trans person, you like talk about the things that you've done, because a lot of the things that you did also made you the person you are, you know, like the experience you gain in doing events and being part of that world is the new perspective that you're bringing, that so many the normal business folks who just grow up with family that done universities, have been through that process, will have a different perspective than you have. And that's what makes, you know, queer people so valuable coming, and just diversity in general so valuable coming into companies, is that perspective. So you've done all this and you got the job and you were at the company, and you were there for how long?
I was there for 2.5 years.
2.5 years. Were you happy? Did you feel like you belong? Was like, what happened during that? And let's be brief because I want to talk a little bit.
I know I'm too chatty. So just to say, I agree with you about the flagging the ways in which you are unique, because especially if you have an educational background in a profession like accounting, or if you are a programmer, if you are somebody, a data scientist, there's a lot of people who have very similar educations to you, but you need to stand out in the ways that you're unique. Yeah. And when I interviewed for Price, nobody wanted to talk about my accounting background because it was identical to everybody else. Yeah. What they wanted to talk about was that I had been an artist, that I had a master's degree in art history. Why did I make this choice? That I grew up in the harness racing community. They wanted to know because that sounded weird. Yeah. Everything that made me different is what made me get interviews. And then they wanted to talk to me about who I was as a person. So I agree with you. And I did get hired, I think, in a way because I stood out. Yeah. Then as far as how I fit in, that was a little bit harder. And you know what? There is a point where, as somebody who is, you know, white, able-bodied person, I did have this privilege of, you know, being able to try and make myself seem acceptable to them through changing the way that I dressed and presented myself. But in the end, it was really hard to work at a Big Four firm. I think that I got to learn so many things and I had such great professional opportunities. And I say this to people over and over. Those were the 2.5 hardest years of my entire life, because it was so emotionally difficult to go to work every day and be someone who I wasn't. Even if they knew that I was queer, I felt like I got called brave a lot at PwC in this way, where they were like, wow, you're so brave for being so out at work. Like, nobody was homophobic towards me, but they were just really shocked at how out I was. And I was like, I got this job at 35. I am not going back in the closet.
Yeah. And it's just to remind folks that are watching that, like, being out at work is still this privilege, and it's still this surprising things. Like in Canada, we still know that, I mean, statistics that have been done, like over 50% of queer folks are still in the closet at work. Like half of us wake up and go through what you go through. And it's just so unfortunate, because I think, we might come from a place of privilege, but I'm like, leave that job if you don't feel you belong there. I think there is so many companies that can accept you for who you are, that wanna really cherish that perspective and that queerness that you have. Like, being queer is becoming a strength today, not a weakness, right? Like, use that to your strength and your advantage, because the perspective that you will be bringing, the experience you will be bringing, so many other people don't have. When you go in a pool, it's full of it's especially in tech, it's still full of white, straight, heterosexual dudes, and you come in and it might be very frightening going through that process, right? But remember that, like, what makes us unique is what might get you the job, and sometimes the thing that you're trying to hide the most is what you should put forward the most.
Yeah. And this was kind of what led me to get into tech, is that while working at PwC, and I was having these struggles where it was a great job. And like I said, I would, even though it was the 2.5 hardest years of my life, I would do it again in a second, because it really helped my career skyrocket. And it gave me the credentials I needed to be noticed by other companies. At Price, I found out about queer tech, and I started to get involved in queer tech, mostly as queer tech would hold events at PricewaterhouseCoopers facilities. Because
a bit weird. Something
happened. Do I? Is that a bit better? Can you hear me now?
I don't know what happened.
Okay. What about now? Better?
We hear you, but it's very. It has a weird note.
Oh. The host has unmuted. Is this better?
No. It'll correct itself.
I'm going to do this, which it might make a difference, but.
Okay. Now you're muted. Okay. We can't hear you. You might have to go into the mic section. A little snag along the way. We can hear you now, but it's very faint. So while we're waiting, just for Laura, like some of the perspective that I really want to share is that a lot of queer folks going into, like, switching a job, right? Like, I think and Laura will talk to you a little bit about this. It was a big decision for her to leave the corporation and that a big unstable job and go to a startup that's a risky business. Oh, fantastic. I was just telling a little bit about, how, I remember our conversations when, where it was like, come work at a tech startup, and you're like, you work at a big corporation that's established and safe and secure, and now you have to move and work at this company that's inherently, startups are riskier, and you're going into, also you looked at the job description, like, I don't know anything of these things that they want me to do, but it was, or I'm exaggerating maybe a little bit, but it was like, repackaging yourself again to get into tech. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. So getting involved in queer tech meant that I was networking with a whole new set of people. Mm-hmm. And in networking with a whole new set of people, and that's how I met you, Naufel, it was, Price wanted me to go out and network in, they want you to pick a certain industry that you feel like you're going to specialize in. But in doing that, in sort of, as while I was still doing my work, also making sure that I was networking and building connections, I started to get offers from companies to work for them. And this is what happened with Local Logic. Local Logic approached me to take a job with them. And at first I was like, oh, no, I can't do it. Because like you said, I was worried about going from this very stable, prestigious job. And I was, in a pipeline to to certain things, the idea of suddenly making this jump into like an early stage startup, I wasn't sure that it was worth it for me. And also I was going to have to make some sacrifices as far as my designation. Instead of becoming a CPA auditor, I would just become a CPA, which for most people is meaningless. But in the tiny world of CPAs, they make it seem like it's a big deal. And in the end, Local Logic came back to me and asked me a second time, and about a month had passed between the two asks. And in that month, it was probably one of the worst months I ever had at Price, as far as trying to manage being in that culture that was often, even though I learned so much there, it was hard because I was pretending to be like a duller version of myself every day to get along with people. Even if I was out as gay, they still want you to be normal. And I felt like I was hiding myself. And I realized that it was actually really painful for me, and it was hurting me, and it was depressing me. And I went in and I said, maybe this is a chance for me to work in a healthier environment for me. Because what I had perceived from networking with folks in tech was that it was such a diverse group of, shall I say, weirdos. It was really great. And so I went in for the interview, and it was really scary to make that decision because it was a huge unknown, but I decided to take the leap for my mental health, for feeling better. And to be honest, I think that decision saved me. I did have to make sacrifices. I'm not going to have a career as like a prestigious auditor at one of the largest companies in the world or whatever. But I found out that that's not me, that now I'm the kind of accountant I want to be. And I was able to be myself at work.
And that's very important. I think I want to clarify something that's important is that, when you talk about PwC and your experience, that it's not that company is horrible to queer people, but that there's
no.
people who thrive there. It's really important. And this is another thing that queer folks need to make. Like, you might come into tech or whatever company you work at, right? And bringing your authentic self to work and feeling you belong, it might happen right away. And I'm so happy for you, Laura, that you came out Local Logic and you find that community, that tribe that you belong to. And I think there are people that might come to Local Logic and work here and find that it's not a good fit. And I think that's fine. It's really important that people try, but don't give up and just stuck in the job.
Oh, that's it. It's fit. Like, there are so many like LGBT folks who work at PwC and they have a great time. I don't think that it was because I was LGBT. I think it was because I'm just weird. There was like so many intersecting things that were rough. It was stuff like, and also it's not about the company. It's about you and how you work at that company. I know some people who they get into a company that I would never want to work at and they thrive. But for me, it didn't work. I realized that I can't work for a giant company because I can't put up with that amount of hierarchy. Like, my anarchist side is like, no. It's like thrashing and freaking out. I didn't like the amount of, I didn't like that kind of structure. And I just had a really hard time with it. And to be honest, everyone was so cool about me being gay. But it was also just that I wanted to be around more strange folks and creative folks. And tech is a really creative industry where people are constantly thinking about new things and new ideas. And I realized that I also wanted to be part of building something. Whereas if you're someone who wants to be an expert and a consultant, a job like working at a firm, whether it's a law firm or a professional services firm, that's great for you because you get to go from client to client to client and be the expert. But in tech, especially if you work at a startup, you get to be part of building something.
Yeah. So talk to us, because we have about 7 minutes left, and usually we end around 50. But let's talk. Why? So what was the misconception that you had coming into tech, and what is it today? Just quickly, like, did you have any misconceptions about the tech industry, and when you came into tech, was that true, or some of it?
Oh, I don't know. I think that maybe my vision of what working at a startup was like was sort of created by the media and the kind of what you see represented as tech culture or startup culture in movies and TV, and
culture.
Either like a bro-y culture, but also one that's like, a couple of dudes go into their garage and they come out millionaires and whatever that. And I think that what I learned when I actually got involved in tech, especially in the business side of tech, which is really interesting, is, startup culture has been going on for decades. We keep thinking of it as new, because it is constantly creating new products. But there is a whole structure and a really interesting side to how startups are founded and funded and grow. I learned so much about the world of tech finance that I had no idea about. And I guess my misconception was that I thought it was going to be more fly by the seat of the pants than it was in some ways. Don't get me wrong. We totally, are blazing a trail every day, and we have to make decisions and make stuff up every day, figure out problems. But, the tech world is a well-developed community of people, and it's expansive and it's global. And I was worried that moving from PwC to tech was going to limit my career options because everyone was telling me I was doing a stupid thing. And now I find out that my career options are much more expansive, and I can be way more than just an accountant. I can work in tech finance, which is massive.
Massive, absolutely. So in the next few minutes, and we're gonna wrap up here, you have a podcast that I've been listening to, and I find so instructive and learned so much of it. It's well researched. Can you tell us a little bit more about the podcast? What is it about in 1 minute?
So 1 minute, thank you. So it's called Bottom Lines Top Dollars, and it's produced by myself and my good friend Hadassah Damien. We call ourselves the Ladies Who Crunch. Our website is here, ladieswhocrunch.club. Our tagline is that it is a podcast about all the money things that you think is ruining your life. So we kind of have two pieces. We do some episodes where we look at big financial ideas like universal basic income or reparations or these kind of big topics and break them down politically and economically to try and explain them, and do so in a way that takes a sort of lefty perspective on things, an idea that we can change things, or that maybe, a critical eye. And the other side is we do some episodes that are more about our personal relationships with money and personal finance. So our latest episode is called "Is There Such a Thing as Ethical Investing?" And so right now we're nearing the end of our first season, and I'd love if people check it out. We're available on all the major platforms, and we'd love to get feedback because we're starting to build season 2, and we already have so many great topic suggestions from listeners. So
wonderful. Thank you. And definitely I recommend it. I really love how much we learned. So time flies as always. Laura, if people would like to reach out to you, ask any questions, what is the best way to reach you?
LinkedIn is always a great place if you want to talk professional stuff, if you want to talk about being an accountant, if you want to talk about, radical ideas in finance or money or personal finance or anything that would overlap with the podcast, or, being an artist and making it work financially, you can connect with me through the podcast link. So look us up on Instagram. You can find us at Bottom Lines Top Dollars. you can find us at ladieswhocrunch.club, which is our website, and our email is bottomlinestopdollars@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Awesome. Laura, thank you so much for coming and
Thank
sharing
you,
your
Noel.
experience. I think my, quick takeaway is that you can be an anarchist and work for a corporation. You can be a anti-capitalist and work for a VC-backed startup. But you can also be an artist and love everything you do. I think it's just finding the company that you fit best. And so thank you for sharing yourself with us. And so thank you again for everyone who watched us today. I hope you also been inspired and learned so much like I did. And so for those who love what we do and love the queer stories that we are sharing, you can support QueerTech by donating on our websites, queertech.org/donate. There is a donate button also on queertech.org website. Any support will help us really grow these episodes. Our next one will be December 17 at noon. We are very excited. Again, we will be having an entrepreneur who will be talking about their experience on making it into the tech world. So thank you for following us today. Laura, thank you so much. And I will talk to you in a bit.
Bye everyone.